So I made this goal to build an agentic trading solution, an algo that learns what's happening in the market in a certain strategy and then update its trading of that strategy depending on what's happening in the market and learn how to get better, all without my involvement. If you're following along or you're new here, I'm Luis. I'm the founder of the Independent Quant, and this is the first video in the series of how development for this agentic solution is going. If you missed the original foundational video as to what the heck I'm doing and why I'm doing it, I'll leave the link for that somewhere that makes sense, depending on where you're watching this. But what we're going to talk on this video is how has development gone after the first week where I'm looking to build this agentic solution. Again, I'll go through what the agentic solution is. I'll pull up a diagram here real fast. I'll talk about what has worked and what hasn't. More has not than has. So, but it's all been really quality learning. I do feel like I've moved in the right direction. And for you that's looking to do the same and build your algorithmic desk along with me. So let's pull up the diagram real fast and talk about what this solution is again. Okay, so if you've gotten to know me, you know I am a solution architect. I designed solutions to be deployed in the cloud. I am specifically versed in AWS. I do architect other solutions, but my forte is AWS. As I mentioned in the foundational video, talking for, in case you have not seen that yet, is this is the architecture for the solution that I'm building here. Again, doing a rounded top, rounded bottom strategy that looks at the market, looks where price is getting exhausted and turning over and looking for entry opportunities to go short on those. Conversely, looking at where price is petering out when it's dropping and trying to catch it when it reverses, and always looking for at least a 2.5 to 1 risk to reward in each one of these trades. That's going to require us to analyze a pattern, see if a rounded top, rounded bottom is being created. It's going to require us to identify the risk, going to identify if the trading conditions are appropriate for us to enter that trade. And lastly, we need to document everything that happened with trades so that we can get better. And by we, I mean the algorithm, not you and I, because we're talking about the agentic solution, so that the solution can get better and learns over time. So those 4 components, each one of them is being handled by an action group, which is this middle of your screen right here, which is labeled action groups. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit more because we don't need to, that didn't work. Okay, so that's a little more zoomed in so we can hopefully see it a little better. So the action groups are what does the 4 functions that I just mentioned. The coordination of those action groups is happening at Amazon Bedrock. And then we have Amazon Bedrock that has to make all these decisions, but a traditional or your average off-the-shelf LLM does not have the criteria for that, for what constitutes a rounded top, rounded bottom, and how to make the decisions accordingly. So we need a RAG to do that. And that RAG lives in S3, at least the contents of it, and Amazon Bedrock queries S3 through Amazon OpenSearch. So that's the bigger components here for development. And those were where I got hung up this week. I was able to build the EC2 instance. I was able to build the Lambdas. No problem there. I've done more than enough of those that I was able to build them easily with CDK. The challenge that I had, though, was how to organize the stacks. The way that you organize a CDK to deploy things. Let me pull up my CDK real fast. So here's my CDK. Big thing that we want to look at right here are these stacks. So the big first challenge that I had this week was I have a workflow for how I organize stacks. Let me pull up another stack that I've built that probably better shows my thinking, and then I can come back to this so we can see what the challenge of going from what is a normal stack for me than to try to do this, which is a new agentic workflow that I have not had to do. So give me one sec. Okay, so here we are. This I'm using this more for visual aid, and try to explain this concept of creating stacks because it's one of the biggest challenges that I had in developing the agentic stack, was I didn't know how to do this for it. So this is what a sound stack looks like, when you're deploying something to the cloud. I've got an entire video series that is not on the Independent Quant that I can link to, or I will link to, so that you can go see me build this sort of thing. It has nothing to do with trading, so your discretion is the value for you would be understanding how to break down a problem so that you can deploy a solution to the cloud. But this is child's play for me, what I'm about to walk through. So for explaining, leaving no stone unturned and make sure you understand the first problem that you need to solve is to how to deploy the solution is how do you organize it to be deployed and how do you manage it after it's been deployed. In order to do that, you have to organize your solution in stacks, which are a collection of code, a collection of services that get deployed to the cloud at a time. Now, what we're looking at right now is my Ghost stack. I call it that because I migrated my website from Kajabi over to Ghost, which also runs on AWS. And one of the biggest challenges I have creating all these videos for you and have you following along with me is right, just like you have as well. You're not a full-time trader. You have your own profession and then you trade as a way to manage your own money. Same with me. So I batch content better than having to do this every single week. So if you look at how I'm dressed, you can tell how many videos I recorded at the same time because I'm not going to go change. I like you, but I don't like you that much. I need to get these videos out, right? So I batch record and then I need a way to schedule those out, because I've got to batch record them, then I got to batch edit them, then I've got to deploy them out to the website, to YouTube, and then manage all of that. Well, I can do that in sprints. I can organize myself so that I can do the batch recording, then do the batch editing, and then have a way to just manage its distribution. And that's what this Ghost Stack does, is it manages the distribution of my content. So that's the background in it. What do I need for that is I need storage for that, which is getting stored in S3. I need the independent stacks. This is the publishing of the newsletter. I've got my orchestrator, my publishing stack over here. I've got a research stack that does research, goes out to get journals and other content for me and then summarizes that for my review and generates this newsletter for me. That's not completely functional right now because I only have the publishing stack working. But then you see that it sends this content after I review it to Ghost and LinkedIn and YouTube. The big thing with here is that AI does not generate content. I generate content. I then place that on and AI summarizes that content for me. And then I can take that after I've edited it and send it out to different sources. So got a storage stack. I've got a publishing stack and I've got this orchestration stack here that whenever state changes, in predominantly Amazon DB and that S3 bucket, I can now invoke another Lambda, another function that takes care of the next step in the publishing process. So all of this is how I organize a stack. One of the ways of I determine how to organize a stack is I go, okay, well, data should be all together. That's why DynamoDB deploys alone in its own stack. Storage goes together. So there's a functional reason that those are together. Also, they are not updated very frequently. So if something updates rather frequently, like this here, I've got another stack that's a platform stack that gets updated frequently. So I don't want that together with a platform stack. I don't want that with the data stack. That should be functionally different. Monitoring and security should be its own thing because I don't want to affect storage or data because I'm updating security. Same with the orchestration. I have all these components working on their own. And then depending on the changes that are happening with them, I want to have one stack that addresses what to do when any of those changes take place. So it takes a lot of thought for me and to kind of organize that. And you see that then I've got a layered architecture here. I've got things that constitute the platform layer. These are things that are far more stable as far as code than the items that are below it. Then I group those even. I've got a newsletter workflow. I've got a continuous improvement workflow. All of that is what goes into architecting a cloud solution. Now, I share all that with you because, we're talking about I've got the idea, go back to that. I've got this idea. It's not an architecture. It's got all the different microservices that I want to use. It's got all the different components that I want to use, but I don't know, having never built an architecture like this, how to best orchestrate the stacks for it. What should go together? What should be independent of everything else? How often are things going to be updated for that stack or for that service? Does that mean that now that it needs to be in its own stack? How do I coordinate the deployment of the different stacks? And that one was what bit me hard in this first week, is the orchestration of the deployment of the stacks. So I started simply with 2 stacks, which was the OpenSearch stack and then everything else. Everything else that was on OpenSearch got its own stack. Go back to the visual code to see this. Okay, visual code again. You see I've got the OpenSearch AOSS stack. You're going to have to watch the second week. Like I mentioned in the foundational video, I am currently at the end of the second week of development, entering the third week. But here I'm talking as what happened in the first week because I want to capture this for your benefit and also for my own historical benefit as to how development of an agentic solution went. So I've got this AOS stack and I've got this agent stack. Now, these two stacks constituted the whole architecture. It was a massive, massive problem. First problem was that when you create a OpenSearch resource, it requires an index. The way that OpenSearch works is you connect, let's say, S3, a storage source to it, where you're going to have your knowledge base. That's where the RAG lives for the LLM. OpenSearch then creates a vectorized semantic search for it. And the way it does that is it uses an index for it. What does that mean? If you haven't touched any of this information before, is let's say you're doing a Google search and you want to know where Starbucks are, and you Google Starbucks. Google will then give you results for Starbucks around you. But really, let's say now you wanted a coffee shop and you Googled coffee shop, then it would come back with anything that was labeled a coffee shop, and Starbucks would or should be one of those solutions. Now, in both those examples, both Starbucks and coffee shop, you should have also seen results that were not just Starbucks, but that were coffee shops. And that is a semantic search. If we didn't use semantic search, then it would be a literal search, where if I said Starbucks, it would only bring results back that were Starbucks. And which would be fine if that's what you're looking for. But in the example where I said search coffee shop, if I search coffee shop, it's only going to bring back results that are explicitly coffee shop. A semantic search is what bridges that. It understands what it is that you're searching for and gives you results that most resemble that. Why is that important? This architecture is OpenSearch needs to do that semantic indexing so that when Bedrock comes to OpenSearch and it goes, hey, I've got this prompt, I'm looking for what constitutes a rounded top, rounded bottom. OpenSearch has an index created for Bedrock to scour through the S3 buckets for the knowledge base to make the decisions that it needs to make, get the information it needs, and not be tied to a literal search. So that's ultimately what OpenSearch is trying to do. What I learned through this process was indexing is a B, right? I usually try to do everything on CDK. I try to do infrastructure as code as much as possible. I don't like going onto the console unless absolutely necessary, which for most of my career is very minimal. The only service that I've ever really had to go on the console to mess around with has been AWS Amplify, which is a front end thing, not really a player for anything that's TIQ. The other one was Cognito. And far as I knew, those were the only 2 services that ever really had and there were minor involvements of having to go on the console to do some things on the console. And that's the AWS console. That's the web portal for AWS or for an AWS account. But for what I found for OpenSearch is that I'm actually very limited as to what I can do with CDK. I can create an index from programmatically from the CLI or from using infrastructure as code, but it's really painful. And what I found is that it's better to just go on the console and do that. For a good portion there, I didn't understand why I was having all these hangups, and I didn't know what an index was and what OpenSearch was using it for. I had to dive into the documentation and really get an understanding and appreciation for it. Well, with that, I was like, okay, let's do this. Deploy everything but the index using infrastructure as code. And then I go on and I would create the index or connect that index to Bedrock, also on the console. I found that that was the best way to do that. At first, I programmatically did all of that here on the CDK, but it crashed continuously, right? And a lot of why it crashed makes sense. It takes a long time for OpenSearch to create the index. It's all dependent on how big the rag that I've created is, but it was sizable. I took my trading journal and dropped it in there. It was multiple files. It takes at least 15 minutes whenever I did a search as to how long this should take. It looks like 15 minutes is the conservative, probably the least amount of time it's going to take, which probably is as long as it was taking me. But that times out a CloudFormation deployment. So I just had to figure out workarounds to that. I succeeded at doing all that, got it all deployed, was ready to start trading with it, connected it to my broker. Everything seemed good, right? And what I even did along with that is I downloaded historical market data and put that in the knowledge base so that it could see what from my trading journal and from the market data. I mean, I kind of went all out as far as building that knowledge base. But then two things happened after I deployed it. One, I realized that the budget I had for this was about to get absolutely eradicated. I thought my estimates were that this was going to take about $150 a month to run. I'm using Nova, which is an AWS LLM, to do a lot of the Bedrock identification of roles, and it was not ideal. And then let me, I guess, dive a little more into that. So I mentioned this was supposed to cost me about $150 a month. I have a propensity to go for serverless solutions over completely resource solutions. I guess the more traditional solutions where you resource the service yourself. And that turned out to be not the correct way to do this. I was not familiar with the serverless solution for OpenSearch. It is more like Fargate than it is like Lambda, meaning that it runs continuously. And it was not cheap at all to run continuously. So one, I had the index problem, then I solved the index problem. Now I've got this thing running and it was just racking things up. Thankfully, I've got budget controls on my account and it was shooting me emails and what it projected my monthly spend to be. And in one of those, it was $300 something. And I was like, whoa, that's over twice the expense of what I had budgeted for this solution, right? I'm learning, so there is going to be costs incurred in going through a learning process. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem when I say, okay, I want to learn how to do this agentic solution. Could it cost? And I'm do all this research and estimate what it would be. Once I see that it's above that I got a problem with. If it's not within budget, it's a problem. So I determined so the serverless solution for OpenSearch is not what I'm supposed to be using. That was the first. And then the second problem that I came to was that it actually was not processing any of the data that was coming through into the system. For this first week, I stopped there. I did not explore why the data wasn't coming through. I more jumped on to the expense more because not just budgetary reasons, though that is a big part of it, but it screamed that there was an architecture problem. And if you've gotten to know me, systems is everything, right? Systems is what allows us to perform to the best of our abilities. When you're dealing with a computing resource, a system is all it is. So if I had architected the improper solution, I need to stop everything that I'm doing. I need to understand what the proper solution is for my use case. So with that, I stopped and I'll pull up now what my burn rate was, and you'll see how I was able to I recognize that I did have a serious problem. Okay, so here we are in the Cost Explorer for my AWS account where I've been running all this. You can see this big spike, and I'm recording this after the fact. It's not, I'm on my second week of deployment, development, entering my third week, but each one of those weeks isn't one right after the other. I just want to, again, capture everything that has been happening so that you can learn with me each step of the way. I'll be much better at recording these when I'm doing them. The idea of doing these didn't come to me until I was in the heat of battle, building these up. This is why you're here, is to understand how to build an algorithmic trade desk, not just to watch me give you generic information, right? So this is what building out algorithmic trade desk looks like. So the week happened in January, the first week of development, and we can see here that my expenses for the OpenSearch service was $123. Now that's because I stopped it. I was burning about $10 a day on OpenSearch, which was not supposed to be at all anywhere near what my budget expense was supposed to be. I've since now removed OpenSearch serverless. And for the second week, what I'm going to work on is going back to regular OpenSearch. That actually should bring my budget down to between $30 to $50 a month, which would be phenomenal, right? To run a strategy like this and use that few resources. The one thing that I've learned from doing this, though, is that Bedrock, you see, I've only spent 20 cents. It didn't get any data to process. So that figure should be higher. It should be a few bucks, not very expensive to do. Where I would incur a lot of costs would be in Lambda, but really you get 1 million invocations per month. I am well under that. But if I had multiple strategies going, I would easily burn through that because I am going through one evocation per minute. So after a trading day, having 4 action groups going, 20 trading days per month, it racks up pretty darn quick. But there's no cost to it because I'm still well below the monthly requirements. So I only paid as much as I paid for that. I paid nothing for, at least for the Lambda. So that's kind of where I stand right now. I was able to see now coming into February, a fraction of the cost. A lot of that is purely because I don't have OpenSearch running. Now I did maybe have some. Yep. So there's $13. That was one day, maybe a day and a half or whatever that it ran the EC2 instances for my trade copier and also for the ones that I've got in this architecture. Bedrock was turned off, so I'd never had to do anything. The last Bedrock ones came from me testing in January, not from the actual strategy running. So big cut down. It's going to be tricky for me to share all the budgeting for you all, for you to understand how much the strategy is costing. I'll do my very best to break that out. And that is because I've got this agentic solution under development that I will be running here hopefully in the real near future. But I also use this account for other AWS projects. So breaking out how much use is being used for a specific purpose is going to take a little bit of mental gymnastics, but that's on me to share with you. The nice thing is that the architecture for this agentic solution is very unique to what the other projects that I've got on this AWS account are. So I'll be able to really kind of dial in and be able to give you an honest assessment as to how much I'm spending running an agentic trading solution on AWS. That wraps up what has happened in the first week. Again, going into the second week, I'm going to be looking at getting the OpenSearch regular going and then getting a good data connection to my broker and seeing what if I can get this going. Hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. Nothing but great things ahead. We are IT professionals, so we iterate to success. And this was, I think, a very big learning point in this process. You want to keep track of this. I'm sharing all of this on the Independent Quant, the videos on YouTube, but I'll have specific videos as to what is happening and how I'm developing, and content only for you that's going to be on the Independent Quant. That's all going to be free of charge if you become a member. And you can follow me along as I build this algorithmic trade desk. It's not just going to be this agentic AI. I have other videos just on being a professional trader, building a professional trade desk. If all that sounds incredible for you, I look forward to seeing you sign up for our newsletter at the Independent Quant, and I'll drip each one of these so you don't always have to come to YouTube or wherever it is you're watching this video to get this content. It'll be delivered right to your inbox, and you can click on it, head on over to the Independent Quant, and see the content that's available to you. Until next time, keep it green.